Dotrice Aguirre lay down low on her bed. Her head, heavy and full of cloudy nothingness, dripped over the side so that her cheek could touch the window, feel it, press against it. She found comfort in its coldness. It made her feel. All day she waited for nightfall, nurturing herself with her memories of the night before and the night before that. She was sensitive to the void that enveloped her and penetrated her mind. She drank it up, through the mouth, the eyes, the skin, all over. She had come a long way, moving through the speckled crowds outside. She'd hurried through the drizzle of rain that rushed her more than a storm would have. Once she entered her efficiency, there was quiet, sweet, warm with sunshine. The umbrella fell to the floor. She hadn't opened the thing. Absently, she rubbed her hands together. She wrung them. Fumbling, she moved over to the stove. It was 6 o'clock. Night was falling. Pressing her thumb into her aching fingers and then squeezing her whole fist, she went to the sink and then washed her hands one at a time, furiously. The cover of the night did not strike as hard as it does in the deep autumn. Softly, drowsily, the June night smoothed over like a creamy dessert peach. Dotrice's mouth watered for the chill outside. Her eyes were hard, like cherries about to be bitten. Only they were dry and bulging. Bowing her head, she sniffed and let out a small cough that was enough to scratch her throat, just once. She rolled her hair and rubbed her face. She got into bed. That soft place was cool, too. The evening air that lightly brushed in through the window set it that way. Dotrice had pushed her bed, that was only just a mattress and box spring, up against the large extended window in anticipation of that summer night air. She generated heat so easily that she wouldn't be able to sleep at night if not for it. Looking up at the sky above, at the inky clouds the color of indigo, she watched as they passed by the moon, cradled in the atmosphere, awaiting and outnumbered by the emblazoned stars. Her grandmother's name was Beatrice. It said Beatrice instead of Beatrice. Her grandmother had a closet made of wood. Dotrice stood in front of her closet, looking for something to wear. There were colors of tomato red, green like a kiwi, and blue like indigo or navy. She closed her eyes and opened them. She rubbed her face. It was too hard. Slamming the door shut, she went into the kitchen. He was inside her. An eruption occurred that she quenched with milk. It was raw, fresh milk that she let drip down her chin before wiping it away. Then it was back to the closet. Determined, she waited a moment, and this time her face was like dough, pliable. She could contort to look like anyone, anything. She could go anywhere. Her eyes were now black. Looking in the mirror, they were a different shape than before. The small, etched hands chose a pink dress. Dotrice's mother was coming. She needed money, food. She needed to look pretty. Feeling the edges of her closet, she could remember her grandmother's. It smelled warm and sweet like amber. It smelled like resin in there. When she was small, she receded into grayness, then obscurity when the door closed. Her little feet crumpled, curled, legs bent at the knee. Her hands could feel the carpet and the base of the closet. It was gray, duck gray. The fibers were short and rough, not meant to be walked on, just meant to cover the cement underneath. She couldn't see anything from down there looking up. In her closet, a book fell. It was an album, It was full of remembrances. So she picked it up, holding it, feeling its smoothness, sturdiness. Of all the things she took from her father's home, she wanted this album. With care, she had collected clippings as well as ribbons, awards from school, and a picture. The picture is what caught her. She knew it was in there. Almost absently, she turned right to its page. There was a lump in her stomach, right in the abdomen. She lifted the photo as carefully as she could, making sure not to bend or tear it. The face was a young girl's, bookended by a braided pigtail on either side. The child hadn't grown into her face yet. The nose was large, the eyes large, as well as the teeth inserted within an everlasting, laughing smile. On the back of the picture was scribbled the name, Dotrice. The boys outside made a mean ruckus that Dotrice didn't like. Her little brother Sam begged her to take him out and play with them, saying, "Please, I'll tell if you don't let me play." They were at home alone, staying inside in the shade as Dotrice preferred. As a child, Dotrice's intelligence offered her freedom, as she found ways to cleverly stand aside, away from others as she generally preferred. On that summer day, though, she and Sam were left alone, so Dotrice didn't have to be clever. She didn't have to be anything. She was older, so she was in charge. Sam had a way of melting her, however, like the cool air of the night often could. He was like a strong man, a barbender, with his large eyes, like his sister's, that could always sway her and pull her out of the self-imposed jail of her heart. Outside, the young boys were as mean in person as they sounded from the inside. Dotrice hated them, hated playing with them. She was bigger than they were, though, so they didn't threaten her. They were like little animals throwing balls at each other, yelling, hurling insults, too. One of them said, "Let's go behind Mr. Brown's house and jump." Their neighbor had a large ditch in his backyard that tempted the kids of the neighborhood like nothing else. Dotrice turned her head to give Sam a look of no. When she caught a look at his eyes, they were already twinkling, filled with the anticipation of glory. At 5, he was hungry for anything that would garner praise. Anthony was tall but skinny. It served him well, for he played basketball and was able to block and fumble so his long limbs didn't break or tangle. When he jumped, the other boys said, "Ah!" The hole was about 6 feet deep, a few yards wide. As soon as Mr. Brown dug it, the boys from miles around knew about it and ached to toss themselves into it. Lucky for them, Brown was usually inside his home getting drunk. The neighborhood boys didn't expect to hear a peep from him until nightfall. It was the height of the afternoon, and each boy had his turn. Dotrice stood a ways away so not to be considered or teased. Sam stood beside her at first, but slowly, shyly moved forward, blending in with the larger boys. Some of them were as big as grown men, as big as her daddy, Dotrice thought. They were tough. One of them emerged from the hole, face red from ear to ear, yet he didn't cry, at which Dotrice marveled. It was Sam's turn, and then, when he jumped in, he didn't come out. There was no sound. When the others looked down around the hole, everything went black. Melvin Cole thought Dotrice Aguirre was so pretty. Her skin was silky, perfect with warm tones. Her stature was petite, fragile. He had never seen anyone who seemed to glow from within the way she had, like an angel. Of course, she paid no attention to him. Even when he followed her around the office, she always seemed preoccupied and clumsy, which to say he liked would be an understatement. Once he kneeled at her feet, though he could see why she could let that pass, because he had fallen to his feet after breaking his pencil in the pencil sharpener, dropping to pick up the broken bits on the floor as she stood above him. Dotrice was always in thought, big eyes staring. In that gray office, he could see why she would be down, unhappy. He had no presumption that he could ever distract her from whatever captivated her mind. Yes, he would describe her as being captivated, a captivating person she held him to. Of course, he ran his feelings by Bernice across the hall. She was in accounting. Bernice did not like Dotrice, never did. When Dotrice came to work for the company as a secretary, Melvin said, "Man, look at those big, bright eyes." To which Bernice replied, "She looks like my goldfish." Melvin shook it off, saying, "You don't have goldfish." Nothing could sway him from his admiration of the adroit automotive secretary. Dotrice's eyes were large, often staring. One of the two photographs she had of herself was a high school picture in which she wore black-rimmed glasses, heavy and prominent. Her hair was pin-curled close around her face. She did not look directly into the camera. Her smile was not shy or reserved. Strangely, it was genuine. However, it was by way of an inner hollowness. She was just there, smiling as if she was in a picture of a picture. If asked to remember taking the photo, she would comment on how she felt blinded by the flood of light, making her stumble out of her chair, eyes even more prominent than before. In her pink ruffled dress, Dotrice paced the living area of her apartment in anticipation of her mother's arrival. Minerva Aguirre did not approve of her daughter in general. She especially detested the idea of her daughter moving out into the city alone. Her hands were prone to wringing, like Dotrice's. With all her childish might, Dotrice might often try to break her mother. To Dotrice, Minerva was cold and unattentive, especially when Dotrice was a little girl. Dotrice remained unmoving, never growing in answer to this. To Minerva, however, Dotrice always had a striking presence. Usually, the girl got her way because of it. Not because Minerva didn't say no to her daughter, though. Minerva often said no to her, in fact, as a sort of rebellion against her. On this day, they would do their familiar dance. Minerva was married now. Her husband came soon after Dotrice's father died. However, they waited to marry out of respect for Dotrice. It hurt them when she refused to attend the wedding, choosing to not show up after having RSVP'd the ceremony. It was never spoken of again, though, due to Dotrice not seeming to remember. Those eyes, just looking, staring into hers as if she had already left her body, was too much. Minerva Aguirre did not have the strength. When her daughter asked her to come to that apartment, that run-down apartment no less, she gave in and went. It was she who paid for it anyway, Minerva thought with a huff. She resolved to force Dotrice back home that very day. Inside Dotrice's apartment, it was musty and cold. The faucet dripped drops of water onto plates covered in garbage. Trash was everywhere. Minerva looked around and wondered. Dotrice took her mother to lunch wearing that pink dress, gauzy and frilly. She was smiling from the mouth, staring with shell-shocked eyes. Those eyes were of someone who had seen war, but when, Minerva wondered. All Mrs. Aguirre could do was bow her head. Again, she would comply out of guilt, but no more, she demanded. Just $1,000, she stated, looking desperate and afraid and completely out of touch, but I need it now. I'll go to the bank. That smile again, that look. She shook her mother when she asked, "So when are you taking Mr. Curry's name?" As if she knew nothing, as if she had only just walked off of some cloud. Minerva put down her fork. You know that everything's in my name under Aguirre, like your father left it. I just want to leave things like they are. Don't mess with nothing. Her voice was low, but she spoke firmly, tightened her lips, threatening. She looked around to make sure no one was disturbed or taking notice. Okay, Mama, you don't have to be paranoid. Paranoid, she said as if in retort. And as if she didn't know the word, paranoid is for those who don't know how to handle their affairs. My business is my business, she hissed. A woman at my age getting married again with what I got has to be careful. Martin Curry is living in my house. You know those church people talk. Give them time. We only just got married. Maybe I'll do it as a gift to him sometime, you know. Her mother had cooled off. She was eating again. The lunch ended peacefully. Minerva stayed with her daughter for only an hour that day, choosing not to return to Dotrice's. Satisfied, Dotrice slept for the rest of the day. Through the satisfaction in having gained funds to eat and stay away, she felt indignant, yet guilty. The satisfaction was bitter. Bernice stared at the wall, thinking to herself, I told Melvin not to keep all that money in that safe. She just shook her head. Then she turned around to look back at Melvin, only to see him through the glass in the back mooning over Dotrice Aguirre. Bernice hated that name. She hated Dotrice herself, but she didn't know why. Pursing her lips, she finally sat down at her desk. Something had been biting at her all day. Something ominous hovered. During the afternoon, Melvin loitered at her desk as usual. He was the owner of the company and had raisins in between his ears, she truly believed. He inherited it from his father. It was a car dealership. He came from a long line of car dealers. The office was cold and gray inside. Bernice heard some woman say, "It's fixin' to rain." "I hope not inside," Melvin said to no responsive laughter. "Of course it's not gonna rain inside here, Melvin," Bernice said with an eye roll. "Melvin, you're such a goober." "What did I tell you about talking to me like that when people are in here, Bernice?" Melvin spoke in hushed tones, though, through clenched teeth. "I'm gonna go get something to drink." "Don't take too long," Bernice said. She couldn't help herself but stare back into Dotrice Aguirre's direction, but she was not there. Bernice thought and then remembered Dotrice's big eyes asking to leave early that day. With a short laugh, she thought, I wonder if it's to get those buck teeth fixed. I always thought she looked like a boy, a scrawny little boy. She caught herself, though, feeling mean. Shaking her head, she bent over to grab more paperwork to file. She was not going to be there past closing again. That night, she and Melvin planned to recount the bills in the safe. Melvin said that the last time he counted, they were short a few bills. But that was the last month. He was able to replace them, thankfully. That man, Bernice thought. His head was halfway screwed off. Nightfall arrived, and it was just Bernice and Melvin in the building. Come on now, he said in a hurry. She followed quickly, and he popped open the safe. Empty. I told you we don't do nothing right in this place. Nothing, Bernice shouted after a few moments of half disbelief. For a short time after returning, Bernice Appleton lived with her sister a few miles outside of the city. It was Christmas time, and she had a lot of nieces and nephews to tend to, socks, sneakers, and things to buy. Toys, yes, toys, she said when people asked if she was going to get anything else. On the way to the toy store, she saw a bright, shiny necklace sparkling at her. Maybe I'll get myself a little something, she thought, knowing she couldn't afford such a thing. But she contended with the appeasement of getting maybe a brooch or a hat pin. After all, it was Christmas. She stuck her face right in the glass window, eyes as if licking up some icing. Bernice saw a pearl necklace, too, and she looked up to see the purchaser. It was someone who she hadn't seen in at least 2 years. It was Dotrice Aguirre, the very same. Bernice had hated this person and the name so much she would never forget. And those eyes, they were cat-like now. Lapping up milk they were and trying on pearl necklaces, Bernice saw. Bernice did not plan on saying anything to the girl, who looked even younger than when she had at Cole's dealership. She followed. Never had she known Dotrice to wear a necklace of any kind, let alone one of pearl. When she stopped, Dotrice stopped. When Dotrice stopped, Bernice stopped. When she resumed, so did Bernice. Dotrice was finally staring in the window of the toy store. Bernice took note that Dotrice carried several large shopping bags as if on a spree. Merry Christmas, Bernice appeared, behind the younger woman's back, guilt finally gripping her. Dotrice turned to look at her former co-worker and said, "Do I know you?" with a warm smile. "Hey, remember me? It's Bernice from the car dealership. We worked together a couple months before you left after that robbery. I could never forget you, Dotrice. It all came out like a stream, a torrent." "I'm sorry, I'm not Dotrice. My name is Martha Garrison." The girl walked off. Bernice could only look after her in awe. "I'm Martha Garrison," Bernice repeated quietly under her breath.